The Monday, December 4th, council committees meeting to order. Roll call shows that all councilors are present in council chambers. Our first order is Finance and Operations Committee tonight. Let's introduce our guests. We are reviewing our investment portfolio with our guest from First National Wealth Management. And let you guys introduce yourselves and.
Hey everybody, my name is Peter Nicholson. I'm the Chief Fiduciary Officer of the First National Bank. I head the Wealth Management Division and Investment Divisions of the bank.
I'm Jonathan Dolph. I am a portfolio manager at the bank and work closely with Pete and on this account. So I guess the overall goal here is just to bring you guys up to speed on what's been happening with the account and give you an overall process of what we do on a day-to-day basis and how the account's managed. At the end, I'll kind of allow questions answered and Q&A session for you guys to go through. But feel free to stop me as we go through the information if you'd like. Does everyone have access to the information? I think they're gonna show it on the screen as well.
And how much time do you have allotted for us? So I know you
We planned about a half an hour, but we can address that if we can.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so the first thing I kind of wanted to go over was just our overall philosophy and how we manage basically all of our accounts at First National Wealth Management. It's really a process of understanding each individual relationship and then understanding what account best fits it and then what assets are going to fit within that account. It's going to be appropriate for the town of Orono in this case. It's really not. Our process is not buying it and selling out of the market on a day-to-day basis. We are invested for a long horizon. We found that overall allocations are the main driver of performance for people's portfolios. And the main thing we want to do is continue to stay diversified, not allowing one sector of the market to drive overall performance, because when it drives overall performance, it can also deter from performance as we move forward. So we have the capability of investing in multiple different types of securities, mutual funds, individual securities, brokered CDs, bonds. Basically, we can tilt this to however the client needs. In your case, you guys currently have two portfolios with us. One is the cemetery account and one is reserve funds. So typically speaking, with reserve funds, we try to be more conservative with those assets. So you'll see that for this portion of the portfolio, we have a 25-75 allocation. This means that 25% of the portfolio is invested in the stock market and 75% of the portfolio is invested in fixed income assets that are a little bit more safe, give you kind of that guaranteed return for the most part, and provide more stability for the account. The reason why we've started to incorporate the stock market into a lot of the portfolios is for the inflationary impact. Basically, you all know very well the last couple of years, there's been a lot of inflationary pressure, which has increased the pressure to continue to get returns so your principal balance still can buy you the same amount. So if we look at this next slide that says asset allocation, this is kind of a sliding scale of where clients should be. In the top left-hand corner, it's an income portfolio, meaning 75% of the portfolio is in bonds and then about 20% is in equity. We can be all the way aggressive to 100% in stocks. That for your guys's case would not be appropriate. But for the cemetery account where the funds haven't really been utilized on a day-to-day basis, they kind of are there for long-term investing. We can kind of ratchet up the approach to include more equity. That account is currently at a balanced portfolio, meaning that 50% of it is in the stock market and 50% of it is in the bond market. Again, this allows for performance to hopefully outpace inflation and provide additional gains for the portfolio.
I'll mention that the 25% stock portfolio, we coined that the Lincolnville model. It's something we've done for a number of years, really since 2008, goes back to that point. That's really where we decided to implement a stock component into portfolios, and we manage approximately 35 municipalities around the state of Maine, really covering all the way from Calais Eastport all the way down to Booth Bay Harbor and in between, obviously this area as well. So it's worked out well. Not only is it helping you with inflation fighting and a small growth component, but you're actually adding a component to a fixed income portfolio that doesn't really move with fixed income. So that's really what you're trying to achieve, is you're trying to maximize this idea of risk management and pulling in assets that don't necessarily move together at all times.
The next slide here, it kind of looks like a periodic table. I really just kind of included this to talk about diversification factors. Meaning we want to be in multiple sectors of the market, not to put all your eggs in one basket. So you can see this goes from 2003 to 2022. And it's pretty easy to pick out the orange color that's on this. You can see in 2022 that orange color was negative 20%. That's emerging markets. But if you follow that all the way to your left-hand side, where it's 2003, you can see that emerging markets was the biggest component or driver of portfolios at 55%. So this really shows, as these numbers bounce year to year, that you really want to be in each sector of the market. Some a little bit more weighted than others, like currently large cap is the main space that's winning. Companies like NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, Google, they're driving a lot of the returns in the overall portfolio. That's why we want to include those, but also make sure that we're diversified across multiple different sectors, so we're not having these up and down swings of the portfolio. And it's worked really well in your case to kind of level out that balance and provide steady growth as we move forward. I'll actually flip 2 slides just to kind of talk about that as well. You can see that this diversification is done in both of the portfolios. This first one is the cemetery, the 50-50 allocation. So basically this middle sector is your diversification of just equity, meaning we have positions in large cap, mid cap, and small cap. Small cap, mid cap, and large cap is just the company size. So a large cap company would be something like Amazon, Apple, Google, those companies that are much larger, and as that scale moves down, incorporated in the portfolio as well. So as you can see, large cap is the main driver, small and smaller portions of the other sectors. And then we also want to make sure we're including exposure to international stocks as well. So you can see that's incorporated here along with emerging markets. The same thing happens on the fixed income side. So we want to make sure that the duration of the fund portfolio matches the outlook of the needs for the client. So we have short-term income component, and then we also have international exposure here as well. I'll stop there and let you guys ask a few questions if you want, and then we can go into more detail there. Anyone have any questions or comments they would like to go over?
I have just a quick one, but
Sorry.
Sure, yeah. I know through other organizations that I'm sort of responsible for investments for, that many sort of wealth management groups have options for so social good funds or funds that are divested from fossil fuels. And I was just curious what your group does in that regard, and whether Orono is already bought into any of those options, or if you could chat just a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, social responsible certainly has changed and evolved over the years, and really depends on the definition.
Yeah.
We do incorporate a Parnassus fund, part of the Parnassus mutual fund family, and it's the Parnassus Social Responsible Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very simple, that they exclude all energy stocks. So if you look at the sector makeup of the fund, it's PFPMX is the ticker symbol, and it basically has zero energy exposure. So Orono does hold that fund in the cemetery fund.
Mm-hmm.
However, we can incorporate this any way you want. We can customize it. We have several nonprofits, several municipal clients who really want to hold some sort of social responsible fund. It really depends on what's important to you and how you want to build this in. Several of our clients would like to see like the Vanguard Social Responsible Fund. That's a very similar fund. They focus on ESG characteristics, environment, social, corporate governance. So many of our portfolios hold that fund. The town of Orono doesn't, but you do have some social responsible aspect in the portfolio. So is that all important to you as a group? Is that something that you want to build into your?
You know, I don't
Investment
think we've
goals.
had that conversation as a group, but I'm really appreciate better understanding how we're invested now, because that gives us the tools we need to have those conversations. So really, thank you.
Absolutely.
Would it, I would assume it would have to be something we'd have to consider as part of our adopted policy that was with our materials if we
Right.
wanted to move in that direction. Is that,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a good idea too. I mean,
Yeah.
it should be reflected in the investment policy statement.
Yeah.
That's really kind of the driver.
Yeah.
That's kind of your roadmap and our roadmap. It really specifies how the account should be managed. So it's something that it's good to base it into that, if you can, but you think, I will say that there are some funds out there, depending on your definition, some funds out there do not have energy exposure. So if you look back at 2022, last year when energy was on the run, had a great year last year. Some energy stocks were in the double digits last year. So that's something to consider. You will have periods of time where your social responsible fund will underperform energy, just, quite naturally, when you have, Exxon Mobil's or Chevron that are outpacing everything else. Funds that are ESG or social responsible based may not keep up with that level of activity. So just something to keep in mind, really what's important to the town. Either way, we can build it in. And in fact, you already have some exposure, which is good.
And the other thing is we can dig even deeper as far as like, you would think BP is a large energy company. But one of the things about it, it also has exposure to renewable energy because they see how trends are going and they want to continue to invest in it. And over the last couple of years, they've been one of the larger investors in renewable energy. Obviously, they're in the oil business and energy business, so that's their main focus. But it is important to kind of, like you said, incorporate all of these factors and understand what exactly you are investing in and how that benefits the portfolio moving forward. Do you have another question? Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, this is actually probably more for staff, and it's totally fine if staff doesn't know, but I was also just curious, as we're talking about the cemetery fund, sorry, I have a cold. And you were indicating that that's a longer term investment fund. I'm not sure that I fully understand what our cemetery fund is used for. Is that something someone on staff could tell me?
That's our perpetual care fund.
Bit of a swing at it. It's essentially used for the cemetery maintenance. So funds from like plot sales, various things like that go into that fund. They get invested, and then we use the proceeds from that for like a couple of fiscal years back. We did some road improvements. We used those funds to help pay for those improvements in the cemetery. So that's why it's considered a long-term investment. It just kind of sits there and grows. The cemetery needs work.
And then we use the proceeds we built on that fund, but you all do see it as a longer term fund was really my question. Got it. Great, thank you.
I'll add to this. I've been involved with the town of Orono since inception. And at first, the cemetery fund was all fixed income, as you all probably know. So it was all fixed income for about 3 years, 2016 through 2019. And then we basically gravitated the portfolio into this mix of combination of stocks and bonds to provide you with growth. So I don't believe you have any disbursements that actually come out of the account currently. And as you mentioned, we continue to see it as a longer term growing into perpetuity, and allow it to marinate and cook over the years. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
totally. Thank you both.
is it endowment based though, in terms of like we only spend the endowment or the proceeds from the cemetery fund, or do we dip into the principal time to time?
It would be for capital investment.
Yeah.
For whatever I need. Ones we did recently, we did some road improvements there, like Zach mentioned, so those would come through the budget process.
Do you have any like foreseeable in the future that you would be taking out of that fund relatively soon? Do you think, I guess what I'm asking is, how, as the person who needs that fund, do you feel that it's like appropriately balanced? Or would you like to see it growing faster, or you know what I mean? I mean, we all want it to go faster. What I'm saying is.
I didn't like that for over here, and the plan to draw from that would be, long term, so it's not something that
You don't have any like upcoming.
we don't draw from it annually, any kind of thing like that.
And just to follow up on Dan's question, there's no limitations that we're just spending. We can spend from the principal or from what we're making on this. If we need 220,000 to do something, we would just take it from that fund, correct? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, essentially, yeah,
Which I would assume there's no limitations to say we could just spend.
Yeah.
What we.
I didn't see anything in the policy, so I felt like.
And I would say about that account, as far as maybe smaller chunks of spending, in the cemetery account, you currently have a cash balance of roughly 25,000. So that basically that cash value is invested in a money market. It's not just sitting there gaining no interest. Currently, it's north of 5%. So that is beneficial for the factors of we don't have to buy and sell out of other stock and fixed income positions. It's kind of already there, liquid for you. But the other factor is we do have the capability of buying T+1. So meaning that the stock would then, or fixed income would sell next day and proceeds would be delivered to you at that point. So it is still very liquid, but we do manage that cash balance for opportunity purpose for the most part. And you'll see the same thing on the next slide for the town of Orono reserve funds, that 25-75 allocation that we were talking about, and it being diversified across the board in a similar manner to the prior, just slightly different proportions. And then we'll go back to that original slide, so 2 back. Sorry, I didn't put this in quite the order that I wanted to. It is the US Treasury yield curve slide. I just wanted to touch base on this a little bit. Obviously, the world has been in a different environment over the last 18 months. The Federal Reserve has continued to rise rates. You can see on the bottom here, it is a yield curve from December 31st, 2021. And you can see how drastically that has changed over the last couple of years. This is mainly due to the Federal Reserve continuing to increase rates to lower pressure on inflation. But one of the things that's unique about this is the blue line here shows an inverted yield curve, meaning short-term rates are now higher than long-term rates, which is a mechanic that we're kind of managing for you. We see the process that moves forward is supposed to look like the one on the bottom. So we want to make sure that we're ahead of the curve and buying in. We do have a few brokered CDs buying into the market in increments so that we're capturing and locking in these attractive yields now, but also have the flexibility for a long-term perspective, not to lock up money at a lower rate than we could expect in the future. We are seeing that the Fed is expected to lower rates 2 to 3 times over the next 18 months, maybe more, maybe less. But it's something that we're going to continue to monitor and kind of update our clients on. You guys have any other questions that you'd like to go over?
How much new money goes in approximately annually to the cemetery fund?
As far as how much is
Yeah.
distributed?
No, how much new comes in yearly? I'm just curious.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
As far as contributions, you mean?
Yeah.
How many, okay. Yeah, we can,
It's somewhere around there. It's usually dependent on like cemetery plot sales and stuff like that.
No, I was just curious with that.
Maybe we don't want a fire sale on plot sales.
No, I hope not.
yeah, we can send a report out to you that shows you.
Well, no, I was just curious if it was like dramatic or if it was like.
If you'd like, I can pull some information from Trio on that and get it out.
Thanks.
The following couple of slides here just kind of goes over performance and then performance of our model funds and the mutual funds that we utilize in the reserve funds. This is kind of getting into the weeds. As Pete had mentioned, he talked about Parnassus and some of these other funds that are located in here. I will pass my card around before we leave, but if anyone has any questions about the underlying investments at any time, I'm more than willing to sit down and discuss what's incorporated in each one of these. It's really a longer conversation, I guess you would say, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and let us know how we can help with that.
So where on here do we find the overall return?
Yeah, so the
To page 10.
that slide right there that's on the screen, if you look at the balanced line will show you what the cemetery has been year to date, last year, 3 year, 7 year. And then if you go to the slide prior to that, that is the reserve fund, which is more conservatively allocated. That shows the return on the fund there versus their benchmark.
So the two,
Oh.
the fund is the light green is Orono's money.
Correct.
Maybe with your bench.
The benchmark is in blue.
No, and I'll mention that last year with interest rates climbing, you're always gonna have that inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices. So if you remember last year, the Fed was quite aggressive, very aggressive, raising rates last year. In fact, they were the most aggressive since 1990, early 1993. And so as a result, you look at last year, what happened, the significant price drop really was within your fixed income. And that becomes a problem if we're in there selling assets at a loss. Ultimately, you as a fixed income investor, you want rates to climb. You want rates to climb so that you can then reinvest in a higher yielding position. So the reason why performance is down is temporary. A lot of that is because we're recovering within the fixed income component of the portfolio. Which really you saw some dramatic price decreases, which was not normal. But we're still at that. I like to say this is more of a recovery period within fixed income. This is definitely not indicative of how performance is forever. Just you're looking at a snippet of a window where price performance was down.
Even over the last month, so this was cut on the end of October. The prior sheets shows as of the end of November. But even since those numbers from the pie charts prior, there's been about a recovery of about $40,000 in the larger account and about $20,000 in the smaller account. That is basically because of what is happening with interest rates now. They're kind of finally settling out, and you're starting to see those yields become more and more attractive.
And November was a fantastic month for both risk assets and fixed income for the reasons John mentioned. But markets, whether they be the stock market or bond market, that they like when rates are low, because obviously with risk assets, stocks tend to rebound quite a bit. And they're kind of extrapolating that into next year, and that's why we've seen a dramatic increase in stocks just over the past 35 days. It's pretty phenomenal.
And did you say that the next slide that follows the orange slide, did you say that was only the cemetery fund or
The balanced line will show you what your yield to year to date returns would
But
be.
this is still our investment, our revenue fund, which is this? This
Just
is
correct, cemetery.
The balance is really, that's the cemetery fund, the one right in the middle.
Balance.
Oh, got it. The one that says-
It
Got it.
basically shows if we have clients that are invested in a more aggressive,
Yeah.
what those yields would be, and then all the way down to an all fixed income, which would be less aggressive. So you would expect the more risk you're willing to take, your returns would be higher, and as you move down the scale, your returns would be less.
And our regular fund is at what level here?
Sorry, in the regular fund is the prior page,
Right,
just
but
because it,
Our
sorry.
bond,
Prior
our-
slide.
Yeah, but
That's
ours is always 25%.
I thought this was, so this is showing us all the different models you have for investment, from your most aggressive down to your all fixed income, correct? And the
Correct.
cemetery fund is at the balanced level.
Correct.
And then our other fund, which you're calling, I don't know what, but
The reserve.
fund.
Is it a custom suite of things? Is that why it's
Yeah,
not on your?
exactly.
It doesn't fall into the model.
It doesn't fall into one of those. That's
So
all. I'm trying to-
the difference is, so the cemetery fund really has active mutual funds that we built into it. That's on our main program. That's about 75% of our nonprofit, municipal and individual clients are on our mutual fund program. So our larger portfolios like the reserve, we're able to customize that a little bit. We've built in some lower cost exchange funds in there. We've built in some individual CDs and some fixed income. Really try to capitalize on some of those higher rates last year. So that's the difference. So one's on our program and one's not, but that's pretty common with larger portfolios.
Yeah, as the portfolio gets larger and larger, we can be more selective of buying individual securities, but let's say the account is only $250,000. How many shares of Apple or Amazon are you able to buy at the current prices? Less and less. So to get the diversification that we need, we usually use active management tactics with these mutual funds.
Thank you.
So in page 8 is that, correct? Page 8.
Right.
Is the results.
Of the reserve fund.
Yeah.
Which, and this does not include the month of November, so if we were to take a snapshot now as of the end of November. The portfolio is up quite a bit compared to what you see here, just because we've recovered quite a bit from.
What we really wanna know is what you're gonna do in January, cause it's
Give you that crystal.
gonna be working for us probably.
Exactly.
I wasn't able to read the audit report yet, but I understand it was very, Sophie, the employee recognition event was very complimentary about the audit. How does our reserve account, like the reserves that we have, match up in terms of kind of what best practices are around for municipalities of our size? You don't have to, if you can't answer it today, I can go back through it.
Can I get back to you with the?
Yeah, it'd be fine, yeah.
Any other questions? I know we're at the 30-minute point, so
Yeah.
we don't want to take up any more of your time, but any other questions?
I was just curious, the amount that we have invested with you in this reserve fund and cemetery fund together is a subset of all of our funds. Was that an amount that we set with you at the beginning, or has that been changed over time? And my understanding anyway is that our total funds are in the 7.5 to 10 million range, and then there's a portion that are invested with you. Maybe Zach will correct me if I'm off, but I think that's ish, correct?
The reserve component for us started around it was around 900,000, maybe a little less. And the cemetery's been around a little longer.
So there was a set amount invested with you, and then over time it's grown to this level, but we've never added another chunk of large investment in with you since our original contract.
Not in the reserve,
Okay.
in the cemetery, there's been a few, as we talked about before, a little bit coming in that way, but nothing significant. But yeah, a lot of this really is asset growth over time.
Yeah, and I don't know the history of that, Sarah, whether it was intended to be sort of hands-off rainy day fund, or whether the council, when it first established these, intended for it to be more actively utilized. And that might be something that we, Zach, can look into.
Over time, yeah, I just was curious, thank you.
This is really helpful. Thanks for joining us and sharing today.
Anytime, thanks for the opportunity.
And like I said, I'm gonna leave my card here, so if anyone has any more questions or need a contact person, feel free to reach out. I know with turnover, just having a name to reach out to is sometimes helpful, so let me know how we can help moving forward.
Is there anything from a service perspective that you all need? I know we may need some things on our side, just to handle the service part of it, but is there anything that you need from a service perspective? Anything that needs to be done, anything online access or anything?
It really has gone through the town manager and the finance director. Maybe our finance subcommittee chair would like.
Leo probably needs an app on his phone.
Yeah.
You can check it out.
No, I think probably where it should be.
Yep. Okay. Well, as long as you're comfortable interfacing with our new town manager, interim town manager.
Yeah,
coordinator,
I had
absolutely.
spoken earlier as far as we'll need some updated signatures and that sort of thing, and we'll have our admin team reach out to get that done, and I'll come back up and have that signature process done, but it should be relatively painless at that point.
And John works out of Bangor, and I'm out of Bar Harbor, but I'm up here quite a bit, so I kind of float around as one of the executives of Bangor. All right.
Yeah.
Recognize it right away.
I was a UMA grad as well, so I'm pretty familiar with the area, so I'm up here for hockey games and everything else, so let us know how we can help.
Appreciate the
Thank
updates.
you so much.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. See you.
All right, I know we have some time constraints with some counselors, so let's move on to environment committee.
Wonderful. Megan, come on up. So I'm really excited that we get an update from our environmental services coordinator. There's a couple of projects that I believe Megan's been working on that we've heard little bits about, but tell us about invasive species, our regional climate action planning process, and this really great report and on our urban forests. And also welcome, good to see you again.
Yes,
The
thank
climate
you.
action planning process, right?
Yes.
Remind me of your name,
Maddie Jensen.
Maddie.
Yes,
Thanks for
from
joining
Mass.
us.
Yeah, thank you for carving out some time for us. have a lot of projects to talk about, so we're excited. We'll get right started. But if we start with the Community Resilience Partnership, we just re-enrolled in that last month. And we've been accepted, so that's exciting. There is a summary report associated with that, of all of the things that the town has done, not just the environmental department, over the past year and a half. So I can get you guys that as well. That went into that re-enrollment package. But that's exciting news because now we're re-enrolled for another 2 years. We'll first start with the Climate Action Grant. That was submitted September 2022. It's a joint application with the town of Orono and the city of Bangor. And Maddie Jensen is here with Bax to give us an update on that project. She has done a tremendous amount of work working with the town of Orono staff, city of Bangor staff, the 2 consultants that's on it. So the 4 consultants on it, see, it's a lot of work. So I really appreciate you being here and giving us this update.
Thanks, Megan. So yes, Maddie Jensen here from Bax. I was last year in June, so it's been a little while. So we just wanted to spend a day giving you the update as we're starting to wind down with this project and starting to prepare some deliverables. So I'll just go through kind of what we've done since June, what the next steps are, and then if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So since June, we did a lot of public outreach, trying to get feedback on priorities, what folks in the region wanted to see come out of this process. So as you can see, we did a number of stakeholder interviews with municipal staff all throughout the region, with regular residents, with advocacy or nonprofit groups, with businesses, all sorts of different types of people. We completed 2 surveys. We attended 9 community events, and then we of course continued our advisory committee, which we had started in phase 1. And then we also formed 5 working groups. So here on this next slide, there's the kind of overview of the project team. So again, back City of Bangor, Town of Orono, and then UMaine are kind of the main leads for this process. And in phase 1, we created the advisory committee, and then in phase 2, we created the working groups. So there's these 5 different working groups around the broad topic areas that we identified as being important and relevant to this community in phase 1. And each of those 5 working groups had 3 meetings where they focused in on that topic area. You know, so advisory committee is kind of big picture project guidance. The working groups are more specific targeted feedback. And we had a lot of municipal staff on the advisory committee, on the working groups. I know both Rob and Mitch and Megan were all on working groups in addition to their, you know, kind of internal project management role. So that was really, really, really helpful. So on to schedule. As you can see, we're nearing the end. We're in December, so we're kind of finishing up that strategy development and starting to draft our deliverables. Really don't have a whole lot more to do. We've sent it around to some municipal staff and some kind of key advisory committee members who are interested in continuing to participate and getting feedback from them on any last adjustments that we can make, any ways that we can make it more relevant to Orono and Bangor, the municipal context, as well as what the residents might want. And then into 2024, we'll do a little bit more outreach, getting this plan out there, hopefully more public outreach, of course. We'll probably be back here visiting you all, presenting the findings and deliverables, and then doing a lot of work, hopefully with the staff, giving them whatever support that they need to hopefully take this, from paper form to, real life. So kind of talking about deliverables, they haven't changed since the last time I was here, but just to give you kind of a reminder, we'll have a summary report with a long list of strategies that have come out of this process, largely around those kind of 5 areas, but they've kind of intermixed at this point from those distinct 5 topics. And then of those 30-ish strategies, 10 of them will get toolkit treatment is what we're calling it. And so they'll get tailored information, specific steps for implementation, specific partners, maybe some funding projections of how much it might cost, maybe some expected greenhouse gas emissions reductions that could be associated if that strategy were implemented. any and all things that we can do to help get the strategy off the ground. So those 10 toolkits aren't necessarily the absolute top priority, though they have been identified as relatively high impact and high importance, but they were more so chosen as strategies that needed a little bit more detail, that weren't exactly super clear as who would implement them, what would be the first step. They might require a lot of different partners involved. And so that's kind of how we chose the toolkits with the working groups is, which strategies need the most support, whereas others, town staff already know, how they might implement. Are there any questions about the deliverable structure?
Do you have a priority for projects that work across communities or projects? Would you prioritize projects that can be completed within a community?
I will get into that a little bit more in the next slide, but there's a little bit of both. And that's something that's kind of been a little bit of a surprise, not a surprise coming out of this process, but something that was more important than I thought it was going to be, and more kind of like it's been difficult to figure out the balance of that, of what an individual town can and should do themselves versus how we can expand that to be more collaborative. I'll get to that more in just a moment.
Sure.
But here's a draft of what the toolkits might look like, just so you can kind of see what I mentioned, with the different resources, cost estimates, potentially draft ordinances or draft policies. This is just meant to be kind of a visual. And then here are the 10 toolkits that our working groups decided on. The descriptions of them are obviously relatively vague, but I just wanted to give you kind of a sneak peek of what's been coming out of the process. Most of them, to your point, are directed specifically at an individual town to implement. However, a couple of them do have elements that might be better done at a broader scale or with other partners. So say the design and implement green trades and training subsidy program, that obviously would need a lot of coordination with, like Hudson, UMaine, some of those educational providers or training trades programs in the region. I think there are a lot of opportunities for the town to support something like that, but it would need, potentially support and coordination across outside of the town.
I would think that creating the capacity strategy for public transit would be another.
Yeah, another cross.
Yep.
Exactly. I think realistically, all of them will have elements of both.
Yeah.
But some of them will be more targeted at, or no, you can kind of just do this in your own bubble, whereas no, this really does need to be broader. So this is just a sneak peek. You'll get the actual toolkits, which they are working through now shortly. So on to some emerging themes and questions that have come out of this process. I think we started this thinking it would be, or at least I started it thinking it would be relatively straightforward, but these are some things that have really been kind of percolating throughout the process as I've talked to folks in the public, as I've talked to others doing this work already in the region, as I've kind of gotten to know all the different towns and how they do their work. And so firstly, communication obviously is going to be really, really important for this process. There are so many people already doing good work throughout the region, but we keep hearing from all of them that there needs to be more talking. Like, we need to get that information out there because a lot of residents don't know that the town has resources, that this nonprofit organization has resources, that they can go to the town over and get opportunities. And so there needs to be some sort of better communication of these opportunities. I don't have the answer for that at the moment, but that's just been something that has come up over and over again. Financial and staff capacity obviously is kind of the big barrier to everything really. And I think Orono is actually in a pretty good position because you have Megan, whose job is focusing on this sort of work specifically. It's the only position in the region that has that. And so I think you all are pretty well positioned already. But of course, it's always going to continue to be a problem. Regional collaboration, again, to your point, I think, BACS as an organization is a pretty good model for regional transportation planning, but there are a lot of areas that don't have that kind of regional perspective, scope, support. Housing, public health, conservation are all things that really should be addressed at a broader scale that don't really have a lot of support right now. Really, really, really big kind of takeaway for me throughout this process, and something that I've been kind of struggling with, is how we can create that capacity at a regional level. Because not only would it support that financial and staff capacity to not have to have redundant resources at each town, but also residents don't stop at the town line looking for resources. The deer don't stop at the Orono town line. They'll cross it, no problem. They'll wherever they can go. And so something that we're kind of trying to figure out is, are there ways that we can kind of jumpstart that regional capacity or support that? Or where do we start to create that? Don't really have the perfect answer, but it's something that I think coming out of this process is going to be bigger than necessarily the individual toolkits or strategies themselves. And that also kind of leads into support for implementation of this plan. I think, BACS as an organization and me as, a staff person have some ideas for how I might be able to support this implementation of the plan in the short term. But I think long term, it would be great for the town to start thinking about how they can support this process. I mean, Megan, again, already has this specific focus, but if we start thinking regionally or start thinking about projects outside of, what Megan has capacity for, what can the town do to support that? I know a lot of advisory committee members and working group members are very interested in staying involved. And so we've kind of thrown around ideas about forming a committee of just, keeping the committee going that already is, so that they can stay involved and invested in this process that they've helped create. So that's kind of all I have today. We're, like I said, really narrowing in on finishing up the deliverables. So we'll be back in the new year with that information, but happy to hear from you all what you want or would need to get these off the ground once we give them to you.
When you say new year, how much time is new year for?
Yeah, so February, March-ish. We have some implementation workshops that we're planning on hosting with like municipal staff and some other community members to give them resources and kind of support in taking these toolkits off. But I suspect we'll be back to this council March-ish.
If there's opportunity for council to sit in and to any of those meetings that would be appropriate, I'd be really interested in learning more and kind of being a little bit more in the weeds on this particular topic. And so Megan, feel free to reach out to me if there's something that feels like it would be appropriate. I don't want to like hover and lurk, but I'm like really interested in this work and grateful to you for bringing it to us, and would like to know enough so that as a counselor I could be helpful in the next steps for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think every level of this has a different way that they think about things and would be able to implement them. So your feedback would definitely be really helpful.
Thanks so much.
Jeff and Sonia, do you see this work coming back in through the environment committee in terms of how we would shepherd it through our process, or?
I think some of it is really just giving Rob's shop or Megan's office tools to enhance what they're already doing. So part of it we probably won't see again.
Yeah.
Part of it may come to us if there's an allocation of funds. But I think what I'm wondering about, and maybe I have this wrong, is that there may be some policy recommendations that come out of this that might have to come back to council. And that would probably be where we would fall in on this, is if we have to align our policy with others in the region to make one of these projects come to life, kind of thing.
And there could be opportunities too to as an entity and a group that's running community potlucks that have public impact start to be a place where some of the connecting and communicating happens with area groups, and just be part of that process of building some of the collaboration that sort of, it sounds like is needed in this work. And I know through my own experience doing this work in farm systems, is always the pinch point, so, yeah.
That's excellent. It's great information.
Yeah.
Appreciate the coming back and giving us the update. too.
Yes, and you'll see me again quite soon, I'm sure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mhm.
Okay, hi. So the next climate action grant, each slide from here on out will just be talking about a grant that has been wrapped up with. So this is the climate action grant. I'm gonna call it number one. This was before the one we just talked about. It's the rollover funds from March 2022. So we finished another Orono Energy Efficiency Fair this October on 7th. And we had roughly 80 participants, 12 vendors and 5 presentations. There was a little less participants than last year, which we were surprised about, but the weather was pretty terrible, so you never know with that. The nice thing about this event is we continuously heard from vendors that they had such quality time with the participants there. So they would come to their booth, they would talk to them for 15-20 minutes about projects that they can implement, which really is why we wanted to start this. So all in all, I think that's really great that they got one-on-one time and got to learn about their projects and take that home with them. The second thing that we did with this grant was have another window dressers community build. And with some of the funds from this grant, we hired a volunteer coordinator to help run the week-long build. We had over 80 volunteers, so this skyrocketed from last year. We had way more help this year. This was anywhere from Rotary clubs in the region to the high school, the Orono High School Environmental Club, and just all sorts of residents throughout. We made over 300 inserts, which is about 50 more from last year. And 36% of those went to low income residents in the area, which is really exciting. Our New England Grassroots grant that we secured as well helped with that initiative. So that was $2,000 that subsidized 9 Orono homes. So they were able to get those inserts. So all in all, we made inserts for 39 homes and 2 museums in the area. And these stats are all great and everything, but I think something that was missed that I wanted to let you guys know about with this event is that we had residents come that were explained that they might have moved here during COVID and they hadn't been able to make a lot of friends. And this event, people had left from it, even telling me and pulling me aside and saying, I have a coffee date with a friend now and we're gonna do this. And it's like, that's the magic of this community build. It is, you know, supporting the inserts and making people's homes more warm, but that also that community that all comes together, you get people working side by side that typically don't. They don't have those communications and those conversations. So that was really neat to see this year, all those different groups coming together. Switching gears, now we'll talk about urban forest management plan. So it was shared with you all the 2023 update, and the Orono Tree Board is still in the process of finalizing this document. But there's been a ton of work that's went into it because if you remember from last year's Project Canopy grant, we hired an intern that created a tree inventory for us. So that was over 1,000 different data points of street trees or trees within Webster or in our parks. And all of that data was used to figure out what do we need to be doing in our management strategies. So with the update, we really had 4 different things that we wanted to focus on. We wanted to focus on increased and strategic tree planting. So where do we have bare areas? Where do we have low diversity of trees, that kind of thing, and just start tree planting again. The second thing was ongoing maintenance and monitoring of tree health, which is something that we have been doing. We're always looking for hazard trees and taking care of them when they need to be. And then also updating that inventory as we're doing those things. So as we're trimming trees, as we're taking down trees, are we replanting in the same spot and keeping that data up to date? 3, tracking and planning for threats to the urban forest. So this is working mostly with the Maine Forest Service and the Tree Board and identifying any pests like emerald ash borer that's coming, tracking where is that coming, brown tail moth, any invasive species, plants, things like that. And then 4 would be increased engagement with the public, including planting and educational events. So the next few slides kind of show some of the grants that have already gone into this management plan and what we're gonna do to work on these 4 management strategies.
Can I ask you real quick, do we have, I should know this and I don't, do we have our own town nursery where we develop our own stock or do we import all ours?
I think so.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
That's been kind of so we had at one point, our super volunteers, Pat and Dave Thompson, created a nursery of sorts in their backyard and were able to cater to an inventory that proved to be difficult to manage. Over the last few years, we've kind of tried to figure out where it would make sense to site a nursery. But really, I think after talking it over and over with the tree board, kind of felt like inventory with local vendors is pretty good. And you know, all the work and effort that goes into maintaining our own nursery doesn't really balance out what we can, you know, especially we can continue to bring in grant funds to buy that stock. It makes sense to just purchase what we need when it comes time. And we've been doing that for the last couple of years, and it's worked out pretty well. Thanks.
Jeff, you can grab something out of the demerit forest anytime you want.
Okay.
Don't tell them I sent you, because it's not my,
So I think I'm gonna skip ahead then to the Project Canopy, just because we were on that topic. So every year we do apply to Project Canopy to purchase a set amount of trees. And this year, the tree board found it important to focus on larger trees, larger native trees that can be planted near ash trees. Because with the threat of emerald ash borer coming and it's getting closer and closer each year, we wanted to proactively plant these native trees in high density ash areas. So we planted 6 in Webster Park, 6 at the public pool. This is where the Norway maples were recently taken down. These were placed there, and then the baseball field, which is right behind that public pool as well. And we did this during Arbor Week this last year, and we first kind of started the morning out with tree board member that was teaching public works staff how to take these larger trees, get them out of their root balls, undo these roots correctly and plant them so that they have the best chance that they can. Which was a neat morning to be able to spend and do that and really get down to it. Later in the afternoon then, or in the evening, we had a public event where anybody could come and learn how to plant these larger trees as well. This was in Webster Park. So we hope to keep continuing that Project Canopy grant each year and applying for trees and keep planting where we see fit. And that urban tree inventory data has been invaluable for that, to see where the bare spots are and where we should be planting these trees. Another grant that we like to apply for each year is the Invasive Plant Management Program. This is the invasive plant control practice plan for the high school lot. So this lot is right behind the track. Back here. And you can see it's kind of laid out in a GIS form where you can see what invasive plants do you have, where are their barriers, and it's a nice visual to be able to take that plan then. And once you have an invasive plant control practice plan from the Maine Forest Service, you can apply for treatment that's 100% funding. So you don't need to match for that. So there's kind of 2 steps to this grant that you need to do. And so each year we're gonna, the tree board would like to apply for this plant to create the plan for a new lot, and then also treatment and kind of keep staggering those year after year. So this year, the high school lot was completed. And these plans are really important because this is the Jeremiah Colburn Natural Area. And this is a picture from one of the treatments that was done a couple weeks ago. And if you notice here, you see 2 things going on. You see a bunch of buckthorn that's underneath in the understory, and then you see a monoculture of trees that are relatively the same age and species. So what we wanna do with these plans is start creating really diverse, healthy forests, because if we continue to let these invasive take over the understory, we're not allowing for other trees to start growing up and being the next generation of trees that are gonna be sequestering that carbon. So it's important to start getting on this stuff now and cutting this back. So this is a picture from November when our invasive control specialists were out clipping all of that buckthorn down. You can see in the back area of how dense and high it was back here. And this is, he focused on the highest density areas, the seeding areas, and then along the trails as well. So this is the Jeremiah Colburn natural area where we use the grant funds that we got for 100% treatment funding for this area. And he removed about 4 acres of high density buckthorn in the middle of that. And all of that was cut stem treatment. So that's the picture showing that stump there. Essentially, you cut it, you dab it with a pesticide that only goes into the root system. It doesn't allow it to resprout. There's no foliar spraying, anything like that. And it dries within a couple hours. So it's very, very direct. Any questions on those invasive species or planting projects before we kind of move on?
So the buckthorn is what you're getting rid of.
Primarily.
And is that mostly what we have for invasive species around here?
Yeah, there are others like multiflora rose and bittersweet and some vine things like that, but the buckthorn is really the biggest thing that we're seeing consistently in a lot of the public lands.
And that picture of that looked like a stump.
Yeah.
That was buckthorn.
Yes.
Oh, I thought the buckthorn was just a brush.
Yeah, so it can be anything from tiny little twigs to, we've seen buckthorn species about that big. If you let them grow, they'll get quite big.
And so the next step then is coming in and planting with more plantings, or this is just gonna let that flourish because of that being held up?
We're hoping that, I think it's going to be a continuation of checking it year after year, getting more funding to continue the expanding and not allowing it, really, it's not allowing it to spread to the areas where it's not, because it's really hard to 100% eradicate buckthorn. So just not allowing it to move to other parts and kind of keeping it centralized, knocking it back. Hunter even told us that doing 1 year of knocking back is 10, I forgot how he said it, but it was 10 years from now, it'll get back to what it was. So you can really get a hold of it pretty quickly and knocking it back.
The urban tree inventory management system, is that what you mentioned?
Yep.
Is that something that's online that people can look at, or is that something that's just an internal tool?
So the data, the inventory is on the tree board website. And it's a map, an interactive map that you can look at. And then the management plan we had shared with you as well, that we're still working through finalizing that, but they kind of go hand in hand. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, sir.
I was curious, for folks in town, just, you have a lot of good resources on the website. Sorry about my throat. But especially like on the buckthorn, is there information on the town website about that and how you can not just cut it down, but treat it if it's in your own yard? I know I have a lot and I spend a lot of time cutting it back and it sprouts back up, and I didn't know till you said it about the thing I could paint on. So I was wondering if there's other people and would like to know that. And also, does it matter for us to try to control it in our own yards? I mean, is that helpful because it will make more seeds that spread, or is it not helpful? Is it a way out of our yard kind of problem? Is it helpful for us to do as a community if we find it in our yards?
Yes, it's definitely helpful. So if you look at this plan, just in general, you can see that there's a lot of other invasives around the boundary of the park versus as you start getting inland to the park. And a lot of that has to do with transplanting some of the things like roses and things like that. So yes, I think it is. It's not really an easy management way because you are dealing with pesticides. So a lot of the time you want a really controlled system and licensed applicator. So I think that you mentioning buckthorn education is something that I would love to work with the tree board on and get their input in creating something like that, because I think that'd be super valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I gotta go. I'm sorry. I've got tickets
No
that
worries.
I think we had before I was on the council, so.
Do any members of the public listening in have questions on the topics related to our environmental tonight, and in particular?
You have one.
I just want to say thank
yeah.
Megan for this and for
Great.
excellent. Thank you. Excellent job. I'll listen in.
Awesome.
No hands raised? All right.
Grateful for you presenting all of this and
Mhm.
I'm just, I'm remembering when we first read, this report from that, what
From the tree board?
student who put all of that data together. I mean, it's just so impressive and it's helpful to have that as an ongoing resource for years to come. I mean, and I was just reminded of how impressed I was when I first read that, and it's so nice that we're getting to use this, and put this into action. So I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks. Switching gears a little bit, we'll talk about brown-tail moth mitigation. And for the last 2 years, we really have been focusing on education and outreach of brown-tail moth. What is it? How can you identify it? Look around your own property. What do you see? That kind of stuff. And so that's when we created the awareness exercise, really the citizen scientist program that's online, which is you can report a brown-tail moth sighting. And this was a great exercise because people were taking the time to try to learn how to identify and then read some of the educational content on the website. So that was our main focus from the start. Then we kind of moved to every year I went out and I clipped nests with a pole pruner on public trees, on the shorter trees that I could reach. And we would take them back to Public Works. Public Works would burn the nests as a fun team activity. And then we would clean
Safely.
of course not safe. But we would clean up, some of the crab apples that are lining the sidewalks and things like that and trimming out those nests. And the more we did that, the more we kept identifying trees that were large, that had a ton of nests in them. You think about Webster Park with all of the oak trees and things like that. There's not much you can do from the ground in those situations. So we kept our eye out for funding opportunities for the last 2 years, and Maine Forest Service just opened up a grant program of the Brown-tail Moth Mitigation Fund that we applied for and was granted. And that should allow us this pesticide injection of roughly 35 trees. And these are the large oak trees. How this grant works is you go out in February and you make a map of the trees that you want to inject. So you can measure the diameter, you can figure out how much each tree is going to be. Get your list of the trees, and then in late April and early May is when the injection happens, and timing is really important for that because you want the caterpillars to be big enough that they're feeding, but not big enough that when they all drop at the same time, they're dropping all their toxic hairs. So the timing is really important with that. And something that we're working with the Maine Forest Service on really closely. Additionally, we're going to be using a pesticide that has a short residual. So that means that once it's injected directly into the trunk, it will not last a very long time in the tree. So it'll do what it needs to do, but there won't be a long lag time where you have other pollinators coming into these trees and getting harmed. That's kind of the steps of this project moving forward. And we sent out an Orono Observer article as well. That should have recently been published, explaining that whole process to residents as well.
So is there still an opportunity for people to report brown-tail moth sightings?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. So this heat map that's online, this is on the brown-tail moth monitoring website. That's linked from the tree board and all of that. You can always report sightings and keep that kind of updated. And actually each year it kind of moves a little bit. So it's kind of interesting to see that, but.
So, are the trees that you're gonna identify and treat, sort of only on public land, or is there yeah,
Yes, so our funds are only allowed for public land and, I didn't mention that. So primarily it'll be Webster Park.
Yep.
Marden Park.
Yep.
And RSU 26. We're
Okay.
partnering with them, lining some of the playground areas and.
I had heard that there were some real issues over in the family housing by like sort of across from the Terrell House, you know what I'm talking about, on the
Yep.
bike trail?
Yep.
That student housing complex. And there were people who were contacting me asking if there was anything I can do. So just FYI,
Okay,
that exists.
Megan, what is the grant? How much is it for?
we got our grant for $7,734.
And is there any? short residual, but I mean, are there any other downsides to pesticides? Generally, obviously, they're not good.
Yeah,
Just wondering, was in 7,000 probably doesn't fall, say 35 trees?
yeah, roughly 35 trees.
It seems like the cleaner option is identifying and cutting them and burning them. And you're not using pesticides, which I don't know if there's any known
Yeah,
bad effects from that or not, but
yeah, so we were trying to balance, of course, pesticide use and risk. Especially with my background in toxicology, it's definitely taken into consideration, so. If we were to clip one of the taller trees in Webster, one of those oaks that we're gonna be injecting, it would probably be 1,000 to 1,500 for the one tree just to be clipped. Versus if you inject, it'll probably be around 200 to 300 for that same tree for injection. That could last up to 2 years of a treatment.
and said timing is important. Does that mean that the nest just never develop if you've done that? Is that the idea? I wasn't sure you were saying about they could be, if you do it the wrong time, they're gonna be falling and stuff. So what does that accomplish when you inject it? Does it, you don't see them or
So what
you
happens?
see them, but they don't develop or something?
Yep, so the steps of this is, say if I were to go to Webster and identify a large oak tree that I see has hundreds of nests in it. I'm going to wait until those caterpillars start coming out of their nests. So right now there might be 200 caterpillars in that nest. Once they start coming out, they need to actively feed on the buds of the tree. And this is usually concurrent with the same time where the water is going up the trunk of the tree into the leaves and bringing the nutrients in, and that's why they're feeding and killing the leaves off. So at that direct time, when you inject it, it'll push the injection up into the buds. The caterpillars will eat it and die almost instantly. There's been contractors have said that once you inject it, they could be within minutes that the caterpillars start falling. And then at that point, however, this is when they're just coming out of their nests. So they're not large enough that they've developed a ton of these toxic hairs. Does that make sense? So if you wait too late in the season, you're gonna have a massive amount of dropping.
Yeah.
If you are too early, they're still in their nest and they're.
And then you said that could last 2 years, but. Okay, so they're still gonna find their way back there next year and develop and.
If the adult lays,
But the pesticide is already in there. I think you should say, cause it's gonna last for 2 years.
so there's two different injections. One of them can last 2 years, has a longer residual. When talking with the tree board, we didn't wanna do a longer residual because we didn't want it to go into the pollinating season. We wanted to kill the caterpillars, what we had wanted to accomplish, and then be done with the injection. That injection is more expensive, but it only lasts for that couple days to do that. So again, it was just weighing the pros and cons of the two different injections and working with Maine Forest Service on those two different ones. You can have a 2-year-long one that has a 2-year-long treatment, or you can have a one.
That has less environmental risk.
That's right.
So it's finding that sweet spot in the middle.
Yeah, for those that you kill, don't then again come back and reproduce, so it's an iterative process to reduce just the sheer number of them.
Right.
So the next year, that tree should have far less than.
It should have far less. Because you'll have the adult that needs to come back to that tree, lay their eggs for the caterpillars to then come out, create another nest, have that whole cycle happen. But if you have a continuation where the tree's not getting treated, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse.
Okay.
So you can knock back a population by the injections.
Interesting, thank you.
You're welcome. And a totally different topic. Electric vehicle charging stations. So we have installed 2 different stations with usage. One at the town hall parking lot and one at the library parking lot. And the library parking lot one has failed commission, so we are waiting for an entire new head unit to come and replace that unit. And that's really why we haven't sent out a bunch of education and outreach about them yet, because we were waiting for that new unit to just be swapped out completely. SemaConnect is now Blink charging. We're working with them to get that replaced. So at the town hall, it's been used roughly 30 times since August, and again, probably because we haven't really pushed the education and outreach component of that. And the average charge is about an hour and a half, and it's typically in the afternoon, anywhere from 1 to 7 is when you see the highest usage of that. So here's 2 pictures of the charging stations. The Birch Street parking lot of the public library was just repaved and painted on these awesome charging stall signs, which are pretty neat. Hopefully that draws some attention to them as well.
That's the one that doesn't work yet.
Yeah, that one doesn't work.
Awesome.
Psych.
Yeah. But it looks good. And then the last grant that I want to talk about is the courtesy boat inspector grant. So this was in partnership with the Greater Pushall Lake Association. It was done all summer long, so we used the funds to hire a intern from the University of Maine. And she was out there every weekend, talking with boaters and inspecting the boats for invasive plants and invasive species monitoring. There was 8 inspectors total, and so there was a lot of volunteers from the Greater Pushall Lake Association. And over 235 hours inspecting boats, like I said, mostly on weekends. And over 452 watercrafts were inspected. So if you imagine that's each person that you're talking with about invasive species and that kind of stuff, it's a lot of education. So it's great conversations that were had. 10 plants were recovered from boats. They did a very thorough job, and all of them were native. So that's something to be celebrated. If you want to know more about this project or this grant, you can look at the 2023 Maine courtesy boat inspector dashboard. That's on Maine DEP's website. But I can also send that along if you'd like the link, just to see how everybody compares up. They did a ton of work this summer, so it's very exciting. And just to wrap up, this is a list of the majority of the grants that I talked about tonight and highlighting some of the orange ones that I'd like to look into for this year and just keep expanding on these environmental grants. And the goal really would be to expand on the previously brought in nearly $230,000 of environmental grants and just keep expanding those projects, keep having conversations with residents about what they like to see, what they want to implement, and that's kind of the goal moving forward.
I'm really happy to see that you're pursuing land and water conservation funds. I think I don't know if we've ever done a project like that in Orono. An LWCF project.
That's one of the programs that Bob and Land Trust used to help make those improvements up there.
Okay.
We've also done other projects with Parks and Rec.
That have used that funding?
Yeah.
Great. I wasn't aware of that. That's awesome.
What kind of projects might be options if we were to be able to access the main infrastructure adaptation fund? What's some of your thinking around that one?
That one I was looking more so into the stormwater management components. So looking at creating we have GIS of where everything is, but not really a condition assessment. So looking into using those funds to create that, to figure out high priority areas for flooding or for any of that stormwater management.
I had a question actually about the Emerald Ash Borer sort of strategy ongoing. I recall in the report, I know this is totally separate from this, but I just wanted to move back for a second because I had this question. I seem to recall that there's a portion where we talk about how some white ash might have some extra resiliency. And so we want to hopefully keep those as like seeding trees. And I guess, how do we identify those? Is it sort of waiting until a bunch of the trees start
I believe so.
getting a lot of damage?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. It's that's the extent of my knowledge of it, but that's my understanding, is that you have to wait and see, and some of them will be affected and some will not.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why we're not just simply thinking about eradicating the species, you know what I mean? You know that there may be some that resist when and if the invasion happens, but
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Some town strategies are cutting them off proactively.
and is it that Have they gotten north of like the Waterville area? I feel like it was the last time I had seen. How far north have they gotten?
I believe the closest population is in Newport and Corona.
Okay. Thank you.
You said this, I apologize, I missed it, but do we know when that electric charger at the library is being replaced or?
So it was put in the end of July. We've gone back and forth and we just had confirmation before Thanksgiving that they had shipped it. But I haven't seen.
As soon as it's here, we're gonna put it in.
Yeah, it's literally, but the nice thing about these units is that it's unscrewing the unit and popping the new one back in, plugging it in, and it's done. So,
Awesome.
yep. We're waiting for it to arrive.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you so much. Super helpful, super informative. I'm always grateful about the environmental updates. I just wanted to ask, I know this is on our website, but I always want to ask you to say it out loud in case anyone's watching the meeting, like for people who want to get involved with the tree board or with anything going on environmentally in town, how do they do that?
Yep, is there the volunteer form that's on?
They can, or they can contact.
They can contact me directly.
Contact Megan or use the form online. Great. I just
Yep,
think you do
there
great
is a
work
form
and
online too. Yeah.
You do terrific work, and I know so many people in town care about it. I want people to continue to hear. This is how they can get it.
Thank you.
Megan's got a lot of information on her website. All these topics. People go there and ask questions too.
And if anybody forgets any of this, they can contact anybody at the town and say, I'd like to volunteer.
Call the main office and they always get you where you need to go. Thanks.
Awesome. Is there any other public comment or questions on this topic before we move on to the next? Great. Thank you again, Megan, for being here and updating us on so many things. Much appreciated.
All right, we'll move on to council chair and town manager reports. I have a few items for council chair reports tonight. First, I'd like to welcome Cornell Knight. He's our interim town manager for those who have not met him yet. Really excited to have him and looking forward to working with him and learning from his experience in other places and sharing our experience in Orono with him. Another timely item on my list is to thank Public Works for coming out and working through the first snowstorm, and they do a lot of planning for it. We only see the execution of it. Look pretty awesome to me. So thank you for that. Two other items. One, last week, Sonia shared with counselors a set of questions, potential questionnaire that we might share with the community to jumpstart our process for the permanent town manager search. This is not associated with SGR, although it will certainly complement the work that our consultant do. And we'd like to get that out sooner rather than later. So if you have not yet had a chance to look at those questions, please do. If you have comments or recommendations on how they could be improved or if they need to be changed at all, please share them with either Sonia or myself. We'd like those changes by Wednesday so that we can share those questions with the community by the end of this week. So, yes.
Are we going to kind of run them by SGR, just see if they have any input or?
We certainly can if you'd like to. I think in Sarah's previous communication with them, it sounded like they were really fine and open to us doing this kind of community input survey before they show up. And I think the questions we're asking are pretty general.
Yeah, just.
Sort of kickstarts public engagement, but I don't think it's gonna undercut anything that's part of their workflow.
No, but I mean, I don't know what the percentage response will be, so if there's anything that the pros have done that they would add to it, I think it's worth finding out and getting it in there. I don't know how many times we're gonna be able to hit the public up and get a good level of response. Maybe it'll be every time we put it out, everyone can respond, but that usually does happen. Yeah. So I mean, I think it'd be a good idea if we can run it by them.
I think that's great, Leo. I'm not entirely sure when the contract will be signed by them and how much that might delay things, but I'm more than happy if folks want me to reach out or you can reach out with me.
Well, I think Cornell has had some communication with them today.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't want to go to the well too many times, right? Especially while we're still in the contract negotiating process. But I don't want to delay. So in general, take a look at them and,
Yeah.
you know, if they do look like,
So target to get out by Friday, and if we can get input from SGR by then, great. Does that seem like a fair way forward? Cool.
okay. So that's one, so please respond to either Sonia or myself. The others, we had a document shared by Councilor Marks with us, which is a letter regarding the process, the ongoing process to work with partners of the Penobscot Nation on the way that we have developed our signage and implemented a process for working with partners on developing potentially new signage. So I would say we have that document now. It's been shared with all councilors, it's been vetted by our DEIB committee. We are looking for a discussion on, I think, next steps at this point. So I know that Councilor Demerit, before he left, asked me to convey that he is in favor of taking this forward to a council discussion to sort of formalize that letter. But I don't want to speak for any other councilors.
Great. Maybe the thing to do would just be kind of to go around and each get a moment to say if we reviewed it and what we thought. And for myself, I am really happy to see this go forward, and I'm excited about it.
Same, yeah, reviewing all these materials. I appreciate all the work, a lot of work that Sarah put into watching a lot of previous town council meetings over the last decade or so. And really with a fine-tooth comb, understanding sort of what the process was for town council, making decisions at each step, leading to the current signage we have, but also sort of a larger discussion that Sarah's initiating here around sort of how we relate in decision-making to the Penobscot Nation when there are matters relevant to our history, our shared history with the nation. And I'm very much in favor of moving forward with this.
I'm also in favor of moving forward with this, so.
Yeah, I wrote it. I'm in favor of moving forward with it. I wrote it with Jeff, by the way. And I guess I did want to say it's already been vetted by the 4 Penobscot folk who were consulted during that process. They're in favor of it. And I wanted to sort of say a thank you to our outgoing town manager, Sophie Wilson, who met with me really early in that process. And the very first step was meeting with her, and her emphasis on staff's desire to maintain a really good relationship with the nation and to do whatever we need to do to keep that relationship healthy and strong and vibrant and growing. The letter came from the Penobscot, one of the Penobscot consultants, saying there's no way forward with the nation at this point without this apology letter first as part of that process, which is obviously one person's opinion, but it was very strongly stated, and the other 3 consultants agreed when asked that it was a good step to take to go forward. So big thank you to Sophie for launching that process and talking to me and expressing her just desire to build a relationship and to do whatever we need to do signage wise to continue a good relationship forward.
I think the relationship is super important. I think the wording is fairly strong in the letter. I'm not necessarily on board with where it's going. The fact that somebody has requested it, is fine. I think, I mean, I would concur that I don't love new signs either, but an apology seems a little strong based on the intent of everybody involved in the process. So I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I think it's clear that the consensus of council is that we should continue to work on the letter and continue to work towards making sure that the language reflects sentiments of the town wanting to build a relationship with the Penobscot Nation. Operationalizing that is the next issue. So in order for this to become a statement of council, whether that is a public order, I'm not really sure what the wording of that statement would be. It's not really an order that would go out or a proclamation that would go out, but it would be a statement of council. We would need to take a formal vote on that. And looking at the December 11th meeting, we have a very full agenda that may or may not permit. I can almost guarantee it's not going to permit a ton of time to talk about another substantive issue. We already are talking about the election hearing. We have I'm sorry, we have 3 or 4 sort of big items in addition to our regular menu. So that puts our next potential committees meeting on December 18th, and then we're into the holidays and we don't meet again until January. So we're stuck. So don't know. I guess I'm asking for, although the agendas are developed by the chair and the town manager, there is always the opportunity for councilors to add items to the agenda. I think that's a cumbersome process. So I'm asking you now, what would be the acceptable way forward? Do we try to squeeze it into an already stuffed agenda next week on December 11th? Do we call for a committees meeting on December 18th, where I don't believe we have one scheduled yet to address this item?
I think I sort of see 2 possibilities. It sounds like there's really wide support on council, and this would pass handily if just sort of presented as drafted and has already been vetted by a number of folks who've given input on it. So we could set it up for a vote, and you know, if Leo doesn't vote for it, then it still passes. No offense, Leo.
That's how it
Or
works.
if there are things that really would sort of change the tenor of it in a way that, Leo, you feel you could get behind, I personally would welcome your thoughts and feedback on that, if it's, especially if it's sort of a level of changes that wouldn't kind of undo all of the work of consensus building that's gone through other people who've reviewed it already. And so if there, do you want to give it some thought? And if there are some tweaks to it that would help you support it, then we could consider that as a council, but otherwise plan to move ahead with the vote.
So
Would that mean we put it on the
that
agenda?
would mean
Let's
we,
put it on the agenda.
okay, so what I'm hearing is that people would like it on the agenda for next week.
Yeah.
And we can do that. I would just say that I think it's too important a topic if we start our meeting at 5 and we're at 7:45 and we're
Yeah.
approaching the 3rd hour.
Yeah.
And we start to say, now we have this last topic to cover. I don't think that it's necessarily five minutes, one and done. I think it's too important for that. So I would respectfully just sort of ask that if we get to that late hour and it doesn't feel like we can have a fruitful and complete discussion and we have to table it, that people understand that we're tabling it for that reason and not for any, I want to be clear, not for any reason. Yeah, Matt.
I guess if, for me personally, if we have. I'm fine with the 18th and saying we're gonna vote on it and let's make this the top priority on the 18th. If there's a chance that we're gonna table it, say we're gonna vote on this and then not vote on it, because I would feel very
So we would have to. call a
unhappy
special
if we
council
had,
meeting the 18th.
if we had members of the Penobscot Nation come here expecting something to happen and it doesn't. But on the other hand, if we put it right at the top of the agenda and we get it done with first, I'm fine with putting it there. But I also know we have all that other, but I'm also fine saying this is important enough to put in its own place. Let's make it a special, make that a special meeting where we can make a vote on that.
I'm 100% fine if the 18th is a special a special
Yeah.
council meeting and not
Yeah.
a committee meeting.
Yeah.
What I wouldn't want to do is have a committee meeting on the 18th and then not be talking
Yeah.
about it all the way till January. I feel like that's long, given the timeline we've been putting out to people, and I'd prefer if we could either do it on the 11th or have a special council meeting on the 18th. Is that?
Cornell, how does that fit in with your availability? And
It'll be a special meeting.
yes, so on the 18th, where we normally would have just done a committees meeting, we'll do a special town council meeting, and this will be our, I think right now, unless something else emerges, this will be our only agenda item for that meeting. Okay. All right. Before we close, is there any public comment on items on our agenda or other items that we should bring before council? Oh, I'm sorry, Cornell, I.
Manager's report.
Yeah.
I was in the zone.
First day, nice to be here. See you all, and I would just offer an extension to stop by the office. I'm planning to work right now Mondays and Tuesdays. This week I work Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday afternoon. And I do have a laptop to take with me so I can have things available remotely. But stop in, I would like to chat with each of you. And I'll be doing the same with staff and with all departments as well, so. Forward to working with you. Oh, and I should mention that I did talk to the recruiter today, because we don't have a contract yet. And she said that's done by another person in their office, and she would get them to send that along, but would not be able to start until mid-January. But if you send me that survey, I could shoot it to her and just say, could you get back any comments you might have by Friday? It was Friday, right?
Yeah, we'd like to get it out.
Sonia, I have one quick comment on the survey, which is the last question asking folks if they would want to be on a search committee or they would have to self-identify. I think that would defeat the purpose of an anonymous survey.
Yeah.
So if that could be turned into
I
a
was
link
wondering that too.
that someone could click on, that would take them to another place where they could send an
That'd be
email
better.
asking. I would like to see that.
That's a really good edit, Sarah. Thanks for that.
And you did say that when the actual one comes, it's gonna, whatever question, 2 or 3, is gonna be a rating one, right?
Yeah, so we could do it either way. I think Jeff's comment was like and this is true, like there's not necessarily an added value in terms of level of data that's actually helpful to us that we would get by having a ranking option. And with 8 choices, it does end up being like a little bit cumbersome. So there was a difference of opinion about whether ranking was better versus just checks and boxes is better. And
Oh, I think ranking like the most number one
Yeah.
is kind of, is
I-
relevant.
I mean, that's fine with me. I don't really.
Yeah.
Like, it's the highest priority.
we definitely can. I have it like, yes, it would be easy to put it in SurveyMonkey or whatever. I'm curious actually from staff friends, do we, the town of Orono, have a license for any kind of polling software already?
Well-
Or if not, I'll just pay $40 to get a SurveyMonkey license and that'll be fine. But we do, you have that. Okay, great. So,
I guess I will ask this question.
Sure.
You talked about get it out there.
Yeah.
From a staff perspective, what do you mean by
yeah.
get it out there?
My imagination is that this seems like a job for Pete probably, where it's like, put it on social media that there's a public input survey and members of the public are invited to weigh in on what they would like to see us look for in a new town manager. So that's kind of the
we had
purpose
a-
of the
Do you
thing.
have a Send out or anything too?
Yeah, we'd had a very brief conversation, so this is not gonna be the formal last and all survey, but it's
Yeah.
a great way to kick
Yeah.
off the process and just,
So
you know,
it's
however
as
we
simple
send
as
it out.
social media post and an email. Yeah,
Fine, just wanted to understand
Yeah.
that so that
yeah,
we can communicate that. And that I will also say, Friday, typically Pete does work sometimes on Fridays. I think this week he is, but so
sure.
the quicker we get it, probably the better.
Yeah. That's a
So-
great note.
so if we could get our edits to Sonia by Wednesday, Sonia will, so that's really Tuesday night at midnight or something, right? Wednesday, Sonia will share that with Cornell, and Cornell will work with his contact at SGR and also work with staff.
Or could we share what we have now with them? Wonder?
I think that'd be
And that
fine.
way We're not
Yeah.
waiting there, because I wouldn't expect them to turn
Yeah,
around.
so which staff person should I work with to get access to being able to make
I think it's,
that? Oh, Cornell. Okay, great, great.
Also, Sonia, I just wanted to say it was a great question, Mitch, and the only other thing that occurred to me is that apart from getting it out to the whole community, it's a survey that's also intended for staff,
Yes,
and it is anonymous, so the other thing would be letting staff know.
Yeah.
However you do that internally, just that it's there, and we hope as many staff as possible fill it out.
great. All right, well, thank you all.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Cornell.
Nice to be here.
And committees meetings, we don't need a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. We'll just leave it.